The first sound I remember that night wasn't the hum of the machines. It was the faint, irregular click of the heart monitor. It stuttered sometimes, like a nervous breath. Each pause clawed at my chest before the green line jumped again, reminding me she was still here. Barely. I hadn't slept in 3 days. The ICU at St. Helena Memorial was lit like an operating room, even at midnight. Too bright, too clean. Lila's face looked ghostly against the white pillow. Her lips were colorless, parted just enough for the respirator tube to press between them. My daughter, my only child, reduced to a whisper of a heartbeat and a collection of wires. The doctor said she was stable. I hated that word. Stable meant nothing moved but the machines. Stable meant death was waiting in the hallway, patient and polite. I held her hand. It was cool, limp. There had always been warmth in her touch, the kind that made even her smallest gestures feel alive. How she used to pat my arm when she laughed. How she'd cling to Evan during those hospital galas he dragged her to. I used to think they were the perfect couple. Her soft compassion against his sharp, ambitious edges. Now I wasn't so sure. I looked at the door every few minutes, expecting him to walk in. He didn't. Not since the night of her surgery. 3 days ago. He'd promised he'd be right back after checking on a patient. He never returned. At first, I told myself he was buried in work. That's what surgeons did. They worked, they lived for it. But when hours became days and nurses started avoiding my eyes when I asked if he'd been by, the doubt began to rot into something uglier. My phone buzzed sometime after midnight. A message from my niece, Julia. She's 25, smart. Spends half her life scrolling through the world's gossip. Uncle Mike, you need to see this. I opened the video, and the room around me seemed to tilt. Evan was on a yacht. A luxury one. White deck gleaming under the California sun. He was laughing, champagne bottle in hand, surrounded by women in bikinis. His shirt open, chest hand, eyes hidden behind designer sunglasses. The caption read, "Weekend freedom with the crew. Bottle with popping cork palm tree. Hashtag Catalina life." The date was yesterday. I felt my stomach twist into a hard knot. My daughter was here, unconscious, body torn open by the surgery he performed. And he was celebrating his freedom. I stared at the video until my vision blurred. Then I played it again. Every laugh, every clink of a glass was a knife. My hand clenched around the phone, so hard my knuckles whitened. I wanted to smash it against the wall, to crush the image of his grin into dust. But I couldn't look away. "Bastard," I muttered. The nurse, Patricia, glanced over from her station. "Mr. Reynolds? You all right?" I nodded, throat tight. "Yeah, just tired." But tired didn't begin to cover it. I was hollow, numb. I sat beside Lila again, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "He's not here," I whispered to her. "But I am. I'm not leaving you, baby girl." Her fingers didn't move, but I imagined they did. I had to. Around 2 a.m., the night quieted except for the rhythm of the ventilator and the soft shuffle of nurses changing shifts. My coffee had gone cold. I didn't care. I scrolled through Evan's social media. There were older pictures too, nights at fundraisers, smiles so wide they looked rehearsed, his arm wrapped tightly around her waist. There was one photo that stopped me. Lila, in a red dress, laughing, head tilted back, while Evan looked at her, not with love, but with possession. That detail hit me differently now. I wondered when love had turned into ownership, when care had turned into control. At dawn, sunlight seeped through the blinds, thin and colorless. Patricia came in to check the monitors. She looked tired too, her dark hair tied back, her scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. "She's holding steady," she said softly. "Thanks." My voice cracked. She hesitated, glancing at me with something that wasn't just sympathy. "You should get some rest." "I can't," I said. "Not until she wakes up." Patricia nodded, her gaze drifting toward the bed. "She's lucky to have you here. Some people don't get that." I wanted to tell her that Lila had someone else, that her husband should have been here too. But the words jammed in my throat. After she left, I pulled up the video one more time. The sound of the ocean, the laughter, the pop of a cork, it all mocked me. My reflection on the screen looked older than I remembered. Grief ages a man faster than time ever could. By noon, reporters began calling the hospital. Someone must have leaked the video to a gossip page. It was spreading fast. Evan Carter, the celebrated young surgeon, partying while his wife lay in intensive care. The public ate it up. I didn't answer the calls. I didn't need their pity. All I could think about was what came next. Was it just arrogance? Or something darker? Did he want her gone? The thought terrified me, and yet it made too much sense. The missing husband. The altered chart I'd glimpsed by accident when a nurse handed me the wrong tablet the day before. Lila's sedative dosage higher than what I remembered him approving. I told myself I was imagining things. That grief was making me paranoid. But the image of Evan's smile on that yacht wouldn't leave me. As I watched my daughter's chest rise and fall under the rhythm of the ventilator, I felt something change in me. A quiet, burning resolve. He might think she's forgotten, that no one would ask questions. But I would. I'd dig until I found the truth, even if it destroyed me. By the third night, the hospital didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a sound. The low hum of oxygen tanks, the beeping monitors, the muted footsteps of nurses gliding past. Every noise seemed to have a pulse of its own. Mine had gone numb. I sat slouched in the same chair by Lila's bed, the plastic digging into my back. The same coffee cup sat beside me, cold and bitter. Outside the ICU window, the city lights smeared through a thin film of fog, like stars trying to escape. I must have dozed off for a minute because I woke to a soft hand on my shoulder. "Mr. Reynolds," a voice whispered. "Can I talk to you for a second?" It was Patricia Singh, the senior night nurse. She'd been kind since day one, firm, compassionate, the kind of nurse who looked like she'd seen too much and learned how to carry it quietly. Her eyes were always steady, but tonight they weren't. They darted toward the security camera near the ceiling, then back to me. "Sure," I said, rubbing my face. "What is it?" She nodded toward the hallway. "Let's step out for a moment." The hallway outside the ICU was cooler, quieter. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, reflecting on the polished floors. Patricia folded her arms, as if trying to hold herself together. "Mr. Reynolds," she began, voice low, "I shouldn't be saying this, but something's wrong with your daughter's file." That sentence landed in me like ice water. "What do you mean, wrong?" She hesitated. "I was checking her post-surgery record tonight. The sedative dosage listed there. It's twice the approved amount for her weight and condition. Double." I blinked, confused, then angry. "Double? That's not possible." "You mean a mistake?" Her gaze hardened. It wasn't a mistake. The dosage was signed off by Dr. Evan Carter. For a moment, I didn't move. My throat dried up. "You're saying he?" She looked away. "I'm saying the file was changed after midnight and not through the normal system." I checked the logs. Someone altered the record manually. My chest tightened. "When?" "About an hour after her surgery," Patricia said quietly. "Right after he left." The air in the hallway suddenly felt poisonous. My daughter lay in that room because someone I trusted, might have drugged her beyond safety. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice trembling between gratitude and rage. "Because it doesn't sit right with me," she whispered. "But I can't go to the board. If I speak up without evidence, I lose my license. And I have 2 kids in college." I took a shaky breath. "Do you have proof?" "Not yet. But the system logs are time-stamped. If someone can access the full database, they could trace the changes. It wasn't done from a hospital terminal." "So from outside?" She nodded. "A remote login. Probably through the physician network." It was too deliberate to be an accident. Too neat to be chance. I leaned against the wall, staring at the floor. He knew she'd be helpless. He knew I'd trust him. Patricia placed a hand on my arm. "Be careful, Mr. Reynolds. You're dealing with someone powerful. Evan Carter isn't just another doctor. He's protected." "I don't care," I said. "If he hurt her, I'll bury him." Her grip tightened briefly. Then she stepped back. "I didn't tell you any of this. Promise me that." "I promise," I said, though the words tasted like lies. When I returned to Lila's room, the machines still hummed their mechanical lullaby. I sat down and stared at her face again, but now every beep sounded like an accusation. You trusted him. You let him cut her open. I tried to shake the thought away, but it clung like oil. The night dragged on. I couldn't sleep. Around 4 a.m., I found myself standing at the ICU window, watching the sky turn a deep gray. My reflection looked hollow, eyes red, jaw clenched. When the morning shift came in, I went downstairs to the cafeteria. The smell of eggs and disinfectant mixed in the air. I ordered black coffee and sat alone, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Julia, this time, a news link. Prominent surgeon under fire. Dr. Evan Carter's yacht weekend raises eyebrows amid family crisis. So the world knew now. Good. Let it burn. By the time I went back upstairs, the anger had cooled into something sharper. Controlled. Purposeful. I sat beside Lila again and whispered, "You hold on, baby. I'm not done." That afternoon, I drafted a complaint. My handwriting trembled as I wrote to the St. Helena Hospital Board of Ethics. I detailed the dosage error, the timing, and the name attached. I didn't accuse him of murder, yet, but I demanded an inquiry. When I finished, I looked at my daughter and felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just grief anymore. It was a vow. Evan had hidden behind his title, his smile, his perfect surgeon's composure. But if what Patricia suspected was true, he wasn't a healer. He was a coward wearing a white coat. And I was done being quiet. I didn't know where to start. All I had was suspicion, Patricia's whisper, Evan's absence, and a gut-deep certainty that something about my daughter's accident was rotten. The hospital board acknowledged my complaint with a polite, empty email. "We will review your concerns in due process." That phrase might as well have been a death sentence. Due process meant stall, bury, forget. So I turned to someone who didn't believe in bureaucracy. George Alvarez. We'd served together 20 years ago in the San Diego PD, back before I left the force after Lila was born. George had retired with a bad knee and worse habits, but he still had the instincts of a bloodhound. When I called him, he didn't even hesitate. "Jesus, Mike," he said, his voice gravelly. "It's been, 15 years? You don't call unless someone's bleeding." "Someone is," I said. "My daughter." 2 hours later, he was sitting across from me at a diner near the hospital, smelling faintly of cigars and coffee. His beard had gone white, but his eyes still had that restless gleam, the look of a man who saw through masks. I showed him everything. The video, the dosage record, the hospital silence. He didn't say much, just scribbled notes, occasionally muttering, "Cocky bastard," under his breath. When I mentioned the financial trust I'd set up for Lila after her mother passed, he raised an eyebrow. "How much we talking?" "Almost 800 grand, I said quietly. "For her surgery, recovery, Clara's schooling, everything." He whistled. "And this doctor husband of hers, he had access?" "He managed her accounts," I said. "Said it made hospital billing easier." George leaned back. "You smell that." "What?" "Money." He grinned without humor. "That's where we start." He asked for copies of Lila's financial records. I didn't have them all, but I gave him access to her trust statements and bank contacts. He promised to run a few unofficial checks. 3 days later, he called me just after sunrise. "Mike, you better sit down." "I'm already sitting," I said, gripping my coffee mug. "There's movement in the accounts, recent transfers. Your daughter's trust started bleeding money 2 weeks before her collapse. Offshore transfers, Cayman routing. All in his name." The words hit like a punch. "How much?" "Hundreds of thousands," George said. "Some small payments through dummy companies, then a big one, 52 grand, to something called Blue Wave Marina Holdings." "Blue Wave," I repeated. "Marina like boats?" "Yachts, to be precise," George said. "Guess which one our golden boy chartered last weekend?" I closed my eyes. I didn't need to guess. I could still see the champagne, the tanned women, his smile. "He used her money," I whispered. "He used her surgery fund to pay for that trip." "Looks that way," George said grimly. "I'll keep digging, but you might want to be careful. Guys like him, rich, connected, they don't go down easy." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. The city moved outside the window, cars passing, people laughing on sidewalks, and I felt completely detached from all. Like I was watching life through a glass wall. I went back to the hospital that afternoon. Lila looked the same, still pale, still motionless, still the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I held her hand again, but this time my thoughts weren't soft. I thought of Evan laughing while her chest was cut open. I thought of his hand signing off her medication. I thought of the money, the lies, the yacht. You trusted him, I whispered to her. You loved him. God, you even defended him when I said he was too ambitious. Her monitor beeped steadily, indifferent to my fury. When Patricia came in for her shift, she noticed the change in me. You look like a man who's made up his mind, she said quietly. I have, I replied. I'm going after him. She hesitated. That's dangerous, Mr. Reynolds. So is doing nothing. That night, I drove down to the marina George had mentioned. It was late, but the place was alive. Music from dock boats, the smell of salt and gasoline mixing in the air. I walked along the pier, the wooden planks creaking under my boots, until I saw it. A white yacht with a gold-lettered name painted across its stern. Seraphine. The same yacht from the video. Through the tinted windows, I could see lights glowing inside. Laughter drifted faintly over the water. I clenched my fists. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not in rage, but in resolve. There would be no more waiting for hospital reviews or polite inquiries. If justice wouldn't come through the system, I'd drag it out myself. I took out my phone and called George. I found the boat, I said. Don't do anything stupid, Mike. I'm done being careful. I ended the call and stared at the reflection of the yacht's lights on the dark water. My daughter's life was hanging by a thread, and her husband was out here spending her money on champagne and women. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't be quiet. When George said, "Don't do anything stupid," I heard the warning as a dare. The Seraphine bobbed like a white tooth in the black mouth of the harbor, lights winked, music pulsed. And from a distance the party looked ridiculous, frivolous, and obscene next to everything I'd been living through. I parked and walked straight to the dock, hands shoved deep into my coat pockets, heart hammering like a caged animal. Up close, the yacht was even more ostentatious. A polished deck, teak gleaming under string lights, the kind of place where people wore labels like armor. Women in skimpy bikinis laughed and leaned against rails, their perfume a sweet, synthetic fog. They moved with practiced confidence, the kind that made men like Evan feel powerful, just for being seen with them. Up close I could see how easily he'd learned to own a room, posture immaculate, smile curated, the exact tilt of his chin that said, "I am admired." He was on the stern, a bottle in hand, sunlight, or the yacht's bright lamps, catching the diamonds at his cuff. He looked every inch the surgeon the headlines had made him out to be. Handsome, controlled, dangerously sure of himself. Only his laugh was louder than the crowd needed. It cracked the night like a signal flare. When Evans saw me, his grin faltered for the briefest second. I think he expected security or a lawyer or Olivia, one of his polished hangers-on, to intercept me. Instead, I was a single furious man walking straight up the boarding ramp. "Michael," he said before I spoke, like a practiced greeting. "You shouldn't be here." "You shouldn't be anywhere," I said. My voice surprised me, low and steady. The people nearest to us quieted like water taking its breath. The bikini girls' laughter died into a curious hum. Evan's shoulders tightened. "What is this about?" he asked, but he didn't need to. His hand found the bottle again, a nervous prop. I handed him my phone and shoved the video into his face. The clip of him with the champagne, caption laughingly celebratory. He watched himself, and for the first time his eyes lost that practice sheen. There was no apology in them, only the small, sharp glint of annoyance. "You used her money," I said. "You withdrew from Lila's trust. You signed something that doubled her sedative dose. You left her on that table. You celebrated while she lies in intensive care, and you," my words tore out of me, ragged and hot. People started recording. The yacht's music thinned down to background noise, the kind that barely registers behind a storm. Evan blinked, then sneered. "You always thought too much of me, Michael." Lila was fragile. Maybe this was for the best. My hand moved before my head did. I didn't feel it connect, just the sudden rush of impact, the reverb of knuckles against bone. His head snapped to the side, and for a beat the laughter stopped, replaced by the surprised gasp of the crowd. Someone shouted, someone else laughed. A woman shrieked, more in delight than fear. Another man filmed with his phone, the tiny rectangle of light capturing the moment for an audience of strangers. He staggered, touched his jaw like a man in a play, and then, because he was a surgeon and he was used to being in control, he smoothed his shirt and smiled that practiced smile again. "You assaulted me," he said, voice low. "Security." A couple of burly types moved in my direction. For a second I thought about running, thinking of Clara alone with grandparents and all the ways my life could unravel. But this wasn't about me anymore. It was about Lila and the truth and the fury that kept me breathing. I planted my feet. The captain, some polite man with a clipboard, stepped between us and put out a hand as if gesturing to both a scene and a budget. "Gentlemen, please, no trouble. Where is your conscience?" I asked, quiet now. My words had become sharp surgical, because that's what I was, a man cutting away the lie. Where's the man who promised to love my daughter? Where's the surgeon who took an oath? Evan's jaw tightened. "You don't know the whole story." "I know enough," I said. "I know you left her when she needed you. I know you took her money. I know you signed off on something that could have killed her. I know you chose this over her. I know more than I want to." Someone had uploaded a clip within minutes. My face rose across feeds. An older man in a threadbare coat, striking the celebrated surgeon on his own yacht. The comments streamed in, some in support, some scornful. Headlines would come later, because nothing stopped once people smelled scandal. A woman, young, pretty, leaned toward Evan and whispered something in his ear. He nodded, eyes sliding to the phone in his hand as if checking damage control. He cleared his throat and spoke with the smooth cadence of a man who'd spent his life crafting narratives. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, voice honeyed for optics, "this is a private event. You're trespassing. You need to leave." "You left my daughter on that table," I snapped. "Did you ever think for 1 second that you might be the reason she's lying there?" He tilted his head in that infuriating way. "Lila made her own choices. She insisted I manage her accounts. She loved me." The crowd hung on that, because people love contradiction, love drama. Someone shouted, "Where's the wife?" as if she were a prop that must be displayed. The idea that Lila might be paraded now, that her sickness would be exploited for ratings, made bile crawl up my throat. Evan moved closer, voice lowering, a predator sent to his words. "You're hurting my reputation. Lawyers will be involved." "Do your worst," I said. "Just come to her bedside." His expression hardened. "I will not be publicly humiliated." "You already are," I said. "You've been humiliated since you left her." Security's hand was on my shoulder then, firm but not cruel. They escorted me down the ramp. The crowd parted, eyes sharp as knives. As they led me away, I watched Evan stand tall and problem solve, call a PR firm, draft statement, charm a network host. And in that instant I understood how well he was built for a world that rewarded the polished and punished the grieving. Back on the dock, reporters swarmed. Someone thrust a microphone toward my face. "Mr. Reynolds, how do you plead?" they asked, as if in court. I thought of Lila, her laugh, her gentleness, the way she used to rest her head against my shoulder when she was tired. I thought of the smell of disinfectant and the beeping of monitors that sounded like a metronome for my panic. I thought of Clara, asking when her mother would come home. "I want answers," I said into the microphone. "I want justice." Cameras rolled. The footage of me striking a man on his luxury yacht would make its rounds. It would complicate everything. But as the flashes popped and the crowd chewed on the spectacle, a fierce, calm certainty settled in me. I had made my stand. They could record me and call me violent. They could make me the villain in 1,000 timelines. But someone somewhere would have to explain why a surgeon's wife lay hooked to machines while her husband sipped champagne. That night, the Seraphine's lights blinked like distant stars. On the video my niece sent earlier, Evan's laugh had been bright and careless. In person, his laugh felt small, shriveled by the proof of what he'd done beneath it. If the world saw a man strike a surgeon, maybe they'd ask the question no one had yet dared. Why? The news hit faster than I expected. By morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Headlines screamed across every feed. Doctor assaulted by grieving father. Hospital scandal deepens. They turned it into entertainment. Talk shows debated my emotional instability. Analysts discussed Evan's heroic composure. And somewhere between their words, the truth got buried under ratings. I wasn't interested in the noise. I only cared about the investigation now. When I arrived at the hospital that morning, 2 uniformed officers stood near the ICU entrance. One of them, Detective Claire Holden, introduced herself with that calm professionalism only seasoned cops have. Her eyes were sharp, and her handshake was firm. "Mr. Reynolds, we're opening a preliminary inquiry into your daughter's case," she said. "We've received reports of irregularities in her post-surgical records." "From who?" I asked, though I already knew. She didn't answer directly. "We'll need to review her medical files and speak with several staff members, including Dr. Carter." "Good luck getting him to talk," I said dryly. She studied me for a moment, maybe trying to gauge if I was dangerous or just desperate. "We also have to address the altercation last night. Multiple witnesses. Video evidence." "I'm not hiding from that," I said. He deserved worse. Her lips twitched, almost a smile, almost pity. "That's not how justice works." "No," I said quietly. "But it's how grief works." I gave her what she needed. Everything I'd found, every name, every date, every copy of Lila's medical chart Patricia had shown me. I didn't mention her by name. I wouldn't drag her into this. By afternoon, Evan's face was all over the local news again, this time not as a rising star, but as a surgeon under review. The hospital board announced his suspension, pending internal investigation. The words were polite, hollow, but it was a start. Still, the public saw what they wanted. Half the comments called me a liar, the other half a hero. Neither label fit. I was just a father who refused to bury his daughter quietly. Later that day, George met me in the hospital cafeteria. He looked exhausted, his laptop open, coffee cold. "I traced the Blue Wave payment," he said. "It's worse than we thought." I leaned in. "How bad?" "Blue Wave's a shell. A cover for a company called Varelli Holdings, registered to an office in Miami that doesn't exist. Guess who the listed co-owner is?" My stomach dropped. "Melissa Turner," I said before he could. He nodded. "Hospital Finance Department. Works directly under Evan. Probably forged some of the transfer approvals. I'd bet half the missing funds went through her." "His mistress," I muttered. The word tasted bitter. He wasn't even careful. George grinned, without humor. Arrogant people never are. I rubbed my face, trying to process it all. So she helped him steal from Lila's trust? Looks that way. I've got enough paper to bury them both if the cops don't screw this up. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The cafeteria hummed with quiet conversations. Families, nurses, doctors, lives moving forward while mine had stopped. I thought about Lila, about how she'd smiled when she first brought Evan home. "He's brilliant, Dad." A little cocky, but kind. She'd said it with such conviction that I'd believed her. I felt something dark stir in me again, a heat that lived under my ribs. "George," I said slowly, "what if the sedatives weren't an accident?" He met my eyes. "You're thinking he meant to hurt her?" "I'm thinking he had motive," I said. "Money. Freedom. Another woman." Lila's trust fund was his safety net, and once she found out, he'd lose everything. George leaned back. "It's possible. But proving intent, that's the hard part. You'd need the logs, the emails, the changes in her medical record. Something that ties his hand to the alteration." "I'll find it," I said. That night, when the hospital finally quieted and the reporters drifted home, I sat by Lila's bed again. Clara's crayon drawing, "Mommy Gets Better Soon," was taped beside the monitor. The sight of it broke me a little more. "Grandpa," she'd asked me earlier on the phone, her voice small. "When is Mommy coming home?" I told her soon. The lie felt like ash on my tongue. The investigation stretched into weeks. Detectives interviewed everyone. The hospital lawyers circled like vultures, trying to limit exposure. Evan's team released a statement claiming, "The father's accusations are emotionally charged and unfounded." He even had the nerve to imply Lila's condition was due to an unforeseen complication. Unforeseen. That word burned worse than any insult. But cracks began to show. Another nurse came forward anonymously, confirming late-night logins under Evan's ID. Financial auditors found discrepancies in Lila's billing statements. And through it all, George kept pulling threads, patient files, offshore transfers, hidden correspondence between Evan and Melissa. Every discovery drew the noose tighter. One evening, Detective Holden called me back in. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, "we're close to filing charges. Fraud, possibly medical negligence. Maybe more." I closed my eyes. "Good." She hesitated. "But we still don't know if your daughter's condition was deliberate. We can't prove intent. Yet. That word was enough to keep me breathing. When I returned to the ICU, Patricia was waiting by the door. She didn't say anything, just placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. I saw the tears in her eyes and knew she'd been following the story too. "She's fighting," she said softly. "Your daughter's stronger than she looks." I nodded. "So am I." Because I had one goal left now, to see Evan Carter stripped of everything he'd stolen, exposed for what he truly was. And maybe then, just maybe, Lila could wake to a world where the truth finally mattered. The morning they arrested Evan, San Diego woke to rain. The sky hung low and heavy, as if the world itself wanted to wash something clean. I was sitting by Lila's bedside, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest, when my phone buzzed. It was Detective Holden. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, "we've taken Dr. Carter into custody." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words didn't register, not at first. "On what charges?" "Fraud, embezzlement, falsification of medical records," she said. "Possibly more once we finish reviewing the logs." My breath left me like I'd been punched. "And Melissa Turner?" "She's being questioned. We believe she helped to move the money." I looked at my daughter, my fragile, sleeping girl, and whispered, "You hear that, sweetheart? He's not getting away with it." Holden cleared her throat softly. "We'll need you at the station later. Some statements to verify. But for now, you should probably stay close to her." I hung up and just sat there, staring at nothing. The machines hummed, steady as ever. I reached out, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "He's in handcuffs, Lila. The bastard's finally where he belongs." For the first time in weeks, something like relief loosened the tightness in my chest. By the time I got to the station that afternoon, the media had already turned it into a circus. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. "Mr. Reynolds, how do you feel about your son-in-law's arrest? Do you believe he tried to kill your daughter?" I ignored them all. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and cheap disinfectant. George was already there, leaning against a wall, arms crossed. "Told you it would happen," he said. "They found everything, emails, wire transfers, record edits. Dumbass left a trail a mile wide." "He always thought he was too smart to get caught," I said. George smirked. "Smart men don't use their mistress's work computer to move stolen money." Detective Holden joined us a few minutes later. She was composed as always, but her tone softened when she looked at me. "He's not talking much," she said. "Denies everything. Claims the account transfers were for hospital research, that the sedative change was a clerical error." I laughed bitterly. "Of course he does." "We've got evidence," she continued. "Enough to keep him locked up until arraignment. But I need to warn you, Mr. Reynolds. He's got powerful friends. Lawyers, hospital executives. They'll try to spin this." "Let them," I said. "I don't care how clean they make him look. I'll testify. I'll go on camera, whatever it takes." She nodded. "That might be necessary, especially if he pleads out." George leaned closer to me. You should see his face in the interrogation room. No more smug grin. Just a man realizing the ground's gone from under him. That image kept me warm all day. That evening, I went back to the hospital. Patricia met me in the hallway, eyes bright with cautious hope. "I saw the news," she said. "You did it." "We did it," I corrected her. "You started this." She shook her head. "I just told the truth." You're the one who fought for it." For the first time, she smiled fully, a real smile, tired but sincere. "How's she doing?" "The same," I said. "But maybe she can rest now. Maybe we both can." Patricia hesitated, then touched my arm. "If she wakes up, she'll need you to be steady. Don't lose yourself in anger." "I'll try," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. 2 days later, I was summoned to court for the bail hearing. Evan sat at the defense table in a gray suit, hair perfectly combed, though his wrists were still cuffed. He looked smaller somehow, still handsome, still confident, but hollow. When he saw me, something flickered in his eyes. Not remorse, fear. Just a flicker of it, like a man realizing his kingdom had collapsed. His lawyer painted him as a respected surgeon caught in a tragic misunderstanding. They claimed I was a grieving father blinded by emotion. They called my evidence circumstantial. I wanted to stand and scream, "She's lying there because of him." But I didn't. Holden had warned me to keep calm. When the judge denied bail, Evan's mask cracked for the first time. His jaw tightened. His eyes went glassy. He whispered something to his lawyer, something sharp, something desperate. As the guards led him away, our eyes met. He held my gaze like a challenge. "She's not coming back," he mouthed. My blood went cold. I stepped forward before I realized it, but George's hand caught my shoulder. "Don't," he murmured. "Not here." That night, I couldn't sleep. His words echoed through me like poison. "She's not coming back." I sat by Lila's bed again, the monitors soft and steady in the dark. "He doesn't get to decide that," I whispered. "You hear me, baby? He doesn't decide when you leave. You fight. You always did." Outside, rain tapped against the window again, gentle, persistent, like a heartbeat. I closed my eyes and rested my forehead against her hand. "He's gone for now," I said. "But I'm not done. Not until you open your eyes." Somewhere deep in the machinery's rhythm, I thought I heard something different. One soft, hesitant beep between the steady ones. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was hope. Either way, I stayed awake the whole night listening. I'd stopped expecting miracles. Hospitals have a way of teaching you that hope can be cruel. It stretches, it starves, it leaves you raw. For weeks, I'd sat by that bed, listening to the same rhythm of machines, watching the same stillness on her face. But that morning was different. It was early, just before dawn. The ICU lights were dimmed. The sky outside still a pale shade of blue-gray. I was dozing in the chair beside her when I felt it, a twitch. Barely there. Her fingers brushed mine, light as breath. At first I thought I imagined it. I leaned forward, heart pounding. "Lila." Her eyelids fluttered once, twice. The sound of the ventilator filled the room, but I swore I saw her try to move. I hit the call button, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Patricia rushed in seconds later, eyes wide. "What is it?" "She moved," I said. "Her hand, she moved." Patricia leaned in, her professional calm barely holding. She shined a light across Lila's eyes, checked her vitals, then looked back at me. "Pupillary response is stronger. It's faint, but it's there." I couldn't breathe. "You mean?" "She's fighting her way back," Patricia whispered. "It's possible she's coming out of it." I gripped Lila's hand tighter. "You hear that, sweetheart? You're winning." Patricia smiled softly. "Don't overwhelm her. She needs calm." Calm. That word felt foreign. How could I be calm when the impossible was happening right in front of me? Hours passed like minutes. More nurses came in, checking her vitals, whispering in cautious tones. I stayed glued to my chair, afraid that if I moved, I'd break the spell. Then, just before noon, her eyes opened. Not fully, just slits at first, but enough for me to see the hazel color I'd missed so much. She blinked, confused, as if the light itself hurt. "Hey," I whispered. "It's me. It's Dad." Her lips parted, but the words caught in her throat. A small sound came out dry, broken. Tears blurred my vision. Patricia adjusted the oxygen, gently removed the breathing tube. "Slowly, Lila," she said. "You're okay. You're safe." Her gaze drifted around the room, dazed, until it found me again. Recognition flickered there, fragile, but real. Dad. Her voice was a whisper, cracked and weak, but it was her voice. I broke then. All the nights I'd held back came crashing through. I squeezed her hand and laughed through tears. Yeah, baby. I'm here. You did it. Patricia smiled at the sight and quietly stepped out, giving us space. Lila swallowed, her throat raw. What happened? I hesitated. How could I explain everything? The betrayal, the theft, the investigation, without shattering her all over again. You had surgery, I said carefully. There were complications. You've been asleep for a while. She frowned faintly. Evan. I froze. Her voice cracked on his name, full of worry, not yet suspicion. I forced a breath. He's gone, sweetheart. You don't need to think about him right now. Her brow furrowed. Gone. Just rest, I said gently. You're safe. That's what matters. But I could see the confusion building, the questions forming behind her eyes. She didn't know the world had changed while she slept. By evening, the doctors confirmed it. She was officially out of the coma. Weak, yes, but conscious. They called it a miraculous recovery. I called it her strength. I stepped out into the hallway and let out a shaky breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for weeks. Patricia found me there, smiling through tears. You did it, she said softly. She did it, I corrected. That night, when I went home for the first time in a month, the house felt strange, too quiet, too still. Clara's drawings still lined the fridge. Mommy and me at the park, Mommy smiling. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at them until my chest ached. When the phone rang, I jumped. It was Detective Holden. Mr. Reynolds, she said, we heard about your daughter. That's wonderful news. Yeah, I said, still half in disbelief. I wanted to let you know, we've officially filed the charges. Evan Carter's facing trial. The evidence against him is solid. He won't see a surgical room again. Good, I said quietly. He doesn't deserve one. She hesitated. There's one more thing. He's trying to claim that your daughter's condition wasn't caused by him. He's blaming an anesthetic reaction. He's asking for access to her medical records again. Over my dead body, I said. We'll make sure the court blocks it. But you should be prepared. His lawyers are vicious. I've been fighting worse demons, I told her. After the call, I sat in silence for a long time. Then I picked up one of Clara's drawings again. In it, Lila was smiling under a bright yellow sun. It looked almost prophetic now. Life painted by a child who refused to believe in endings. The next morning, I went back to the hospital early. Lila was awake, eyes clearer now. When she saw me, she smiled faintly. I dreamed of the ocean, she whispered. It was so blue, but I couldn't move. I brushed her hair back. You don't have to dream anymore. She looked at me, voice small. Where's Evan? I hesitated, then met her eyes. He's where he belongs. Something in her expression shifted. A shadow of realization, a flicker of dread. Dad, she whispered. What did he do? And just like that, telling her I knew the next battle I'd imagined. The one where I'd have the words in my head for days. But when Lila looked at me with those weak, trusting eyes, everything I'd planned dissolved. She deserved the truth, but not the kind that breaks you before you're strong enough to stand. It was late afternoon. The room washed in a soft gold light that made her skin look almost healthy again. She was sitting up slightly, propped by pillows, her voice still fragile but steadier now. Clara had visited that morning, and the color in Lila's cheeks had returned after holding her daughter's hand. That little girl had done more for her recovery than any machine ever could. Now, it was just the two of us. Dad, she said quietly, you've been avoiding my question. I sighed. Which one? Her eyes narrowed faintly. Evan. What happened to him? I sat down, elbows on my knees. He's been arrested. Her lips parted in disbelief. Arrested? For what? For a lot of things, I said. Fraud. Theft. Falsifying your medical records. She blinked, confusion flickering into disbelief. That's not, she stopped, swallowed. You're saying he did something to me? I hesitated. We don't know everything yet. But the evidence, Lila, it's bad. He took money from your trust. He changed your medication dosage. You almost didn't make it. She stared at me, as if trying to align the words with the man she loved. "No," she whispered. "He wouldn't, he couldn't." "Sweetheart," I said softly, "he did." Her breathing hitched, and I saw her body tense. "There must be a mistake. Maybe someone else." "There's no mistake," I said. "He forged signatures, routed money offshore, used your name. And when you were on that table, he signed off a dose that could have killed you." Her tears came then, slow, silent. She turned her face away from me, staring at the wall like it could give her answers. "I thought he loved me," she whispered. "I defended him to everyone." I reached for her hand, but she pulled it back. Not in anger, just lost in her own storm. "I'm sorry," I said. "I should have protected you sooner." For a while, we said nothing. The machines hummed softly between us. Then, after what felt like forever, she spoke again. "Does he know I woke up?" "Yes," I said. "He'll know by now." Her jaw tightened. "I need to see him." The words hit me like a blow. "Absolutely not." "Dad." "No," I stood. "You're not facing him. Not in this state." She looked up at me, eyes wet but steady. "I have to. I need to hear it from him. I need to understand why." I wanted to argue, to forbid it outright, but I saw the resolve in her face. The same stubborn streak she'd inherited from me. If I refused, she'd just do it later. So I agreed, on one condition, that I'd be there too. The county detention center was cold and gray, the kind of place that stripped people down to what they truly were. Evan sat behind the glass, wearing an orange jumpsuit, his once polished hair unkempt. But even now, he held himself like a man above consequence. When he saw Lila, something flickered across his face, shock, maybe even guilt, but it vanished quickly, replaced by that same smirk that had made me want to break his jaw again. "Lila," he said, leaning toward the glass, his voice smooth, almost tender. "You're awake." She didn't respond at first, just stared at him. "Then why?" He tilted his head. "Why what?" "You know what," she said. Her voice trembled, but didn't break. "You changed my records. You took my money. You left me there." Evan sighed, almost theatrically. "You don't understand, sweetheart. I was trying to protect us." "Protect us," she repeated, incredulous. "By stealing from me?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You were never supposed to find out. The hospital was cutting funding. Our department was at risk. I moved the money temporarily to cover expenses. I was going to put it back." "You liar," I said under my breath, but Lila raised a hand, stopping me. "And the sedative?" she asked. "Was that temporary too?" His jaw tightened. For the first time, the mask cracked. "You weren't supposed to wake up," he said quietly. The words froze the air between us. Lila recoiled, her breath hitching. "What did you say?" He blinked, realizing too late what had slipped. "You were suffering, Lila. You didn't know what it was like watching you in pain. It was supposed to be peaceful. You wouldn't have felt anything." "You tried to kill me," she whispered. He shook his head wildly. No, it wasn't like that. It was mercy. You were falling apart. You hated what your life had become. Don't you remember? You said you wished it would stop." "Evan," she said, her voice trembling now. I was scared. "That's what people say when they're in pain, not when they mean it." He pressed his hands against the glass, desperate now. "I loved you. Everything I did was for you." I stood, rage shaking through me. "You don't know the meaning of love," I said. "You poisoned it, just like you poisoned her." Guards came then, pulling him back as he shouted her name, his voice cracking into madness. "Lila, please. You have to understand." But she didn't look at him. She just sat there, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. As the guards dragged him away, she whispered, "He killed the man I thought I loved long, before he ever touched me." That night, back in her room, she asked to see Clara. When her daughter ran into her arms, Lila held her so tightly, I thought she'd never let go. "Mommy's here," she whispered, "and she's not going anywhere again." And for the first time since all of this began, I believed her. The trial began 6 months after Lila woke. By then, she was walking again, slowly, carefully, but on her own. She still tired easily, still winced when the 4 scars along her arm flared under cold weather. But she was alive. That was more than I'd dared to hope for back in the ICU. Evan Carter, once the rising star of St. Helena Memorial, now stood accused of attempted murder, fraud, and medical malpractice. The case drew national attention. The doctor who played God. It was grotesque how fascinated people were by it. They loved the scandal, the handsome surgeon, the betrayed wife, the grieving father turned avenger. But for us, it wasn't a story. It was what was left of our lives. The courthouse smelled of old wood and disinfectant, like everything important and miserable in this world. Reporters lined the steps, flashes exploding as we walked past. Lila wore a simple gray dress and no makeup. She looked fragile and strong all at once, like porcelain that refused to break. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. Evan sat at the defense table, perfectly groomed, wearing a crisp navy suit instead of a jumpsuit now. His lawyers had polished him back into the image of a respectable man. But no amount of tailoring could erase the cold vacancy in his eyes. When the judge entered, everyone rose. My heart hammered, so loudly I barely heard the words that followed. The charges, the pleas, the motions, it all blurred until the prosecution called their first witness. Detective Holden. She walked to the stand with her usual calm authority and laid out the timeline like a surgeon herself. Precise, deliberate. The falsified medical logs, the unauthorized dosages, the offshore accounts, the emails between Evan and Melissa Turner. Each detail was a nail driven into his coffin. Evan's lawyer tried to counter, of course. Claimed the dosage changes were a hospital system glitch, that the money was temporary research funding. But Holden's evidence was ironclad, and George's financial reports closed every loophole they tried to crawl through. Still, the hardest day was when Lila took the stand. The courtroom went silent when she approached the witness box. She moved slowly, leaning on her cane, but she didn't let anyone help her. Her voice trembled at first, but by the second question, she found her strength. "Mrs. Carter," the prosecutor began, "do you recall the day of your surgery?" "I remember fear," she said softly. "I remember trusting my husband." The prosecutor nodded. "And what do you remember after that?" She swallowed. "Pain. Then nothing. Until I woke up weeks later, and my father told me what happened." Her eyes flicked to Evan, and for the first time since that jail visit, their gazes met. He smiled faintly, as if he still thought he could charm her back into silence. But Lila didn't flinch. "Did your husband ever discuss your medical care or finances with you before your collapse?" "Yes," she said. "He told me not to worry about anything, that he would handle it, and I believed him." Her voice cracked then, just a little. "He said I was too emotional to deal with stress, that I should focus on getting better. I thought that was love. It wasn't, it was control." Even the jurors seemed moved by her quiet courage. Evan's expression hardened, jaw tightening. He looked like a man watching his world burn and realizing he'd lit the match himself. When the defense questioned her, they tried to twist everything, suggested that her memory was unreliable due to trauma, that her coma had blurred her perception of events. Lila didn't lash out. She simply said, "My body remembers what he did, even if the world wants to forget." Her words echoed through the room. Even the judge paused before continuing. After she stepped down, she walked past Evan without looking at him. But I did. His eyes followed her like a ghost's, angry, hollow, desperate. The trial stretched on for weeks. Melissa Turner turned state's witness in exchange for a lighter sentence. Her testimony confirmed everything. The stolen money, the forged signatures, even the night Evan altered the sedative dosage from his home computer. He said she was suffering. Melissa told the court. He said ending it would be merciful. I thought he was drunk or joking. But the next day, he told me not to ask questions. The courtroom erupted when she said that. Even the reporters stopped typing for a moment. When closing arguments came, the prosecutor was calm but deadly. "This wasn't an accident," she said. "It was betrayal in its purest form, by a man who believed his brilliance made him untouchable." The defense tried to paint Evan as a tragic figure under pressure, a man who made mistakes out of love and exhaustion. But by then, no one was buying it. The jury deliberated for 2 days. 2 endless, suffocating days. When they finally returned, The world seemed to slow. My hands trembled as the foreman stood. On the charge of attempted murder, he said, "We find the defendant guilty." The rest of the words blurred under the rush of blood in my ears. Fraud, embezzlement, forgery, guilty, guilty, guilty. Lila closed her eyes. A single tear slipped down her cheek. Evan didn't move. He just sat there, his perfect posture cracking for the first time, his hands trembling on the table. When the judge read the sentence, 20 years to life, he finally looked at me. There was no hate in his eyes now, just disbelief. Like he couldn't fathom that the world had finally stopped bending for him. That night, when it was all over, Lila and I stood outside the courthouse steps. The air smelled of rain and camera flashes. She took my hand and said, "It's done." "Yeah," I said quietly. "It's done." But I knew the real healing was just beginning. Freedom, I learned, doesn't always come with peace. Evan was behind bars, but his shadow lingered over everything. The news cycle refused to let it die. Articles, interviews, documentaries dissecting our pain like it was public property. For a while, I avoided them. But one night, curiosity got the better of me, and I watched a segment titled "The Surgeon's Sin." They painted him like a fallen genius, a brilliant man destroyed by obsession. They called Lila the miracle wife, and me the vengeful father. None of them knew the truth behind the headlines, the sleepless nights, the guilt, the lingering fear that we'd never be whole again. After the verdict, Lila moved in with me for a while. Her house, the one she'd shared with Evan, felt haunted. She couldn't sleep there, couldn't bear to touch the walls he'd built around her. Clara, at 7, adapted faster. Children always do. She filled the house with her laughter again, her crayons, her stubborn joy. But sometimes I'd catch Lila staring out the window, lost in thought. One night, a month after the sentencing, she came to me in the kitchen. "Dad," she said, "can we talk?" She looked different now. Stronger, but quieter. Like someone who had survived a storm but still felt the rain under her skin. "Of course," I said, setting down my coffee. She took a deep breath. "I keep dreaming about him. The operating room. The light. I see him standing over me, smiling. It's like my brain keeps replaying what almost happened." I nodded. Trauma does that. It doesn't end just because he's gone. She rubbed her temples. I thought the trial would help me move on. But every time I close my eyes, I feel that moment again, the helplessness. And part of me still wants to know why. Why did he think he had the right? "Because he never saw you as a person," I said quietly. "Just something that belonged to him. Men like that don't understand love. They only understand possession." She looked up at me. "Do you think he ever really loved me?" That question broke me more than any courtroom testimony. "I think he loved the idea of you," I said. "The version that made him look good. The woman who admired him, who made him feel invincible. But real love, he never learned that." She was silent for a long time. Then, softly, "I did. I loved him. I hate that I still remember how that felt." I reached for her hand. "That's not weakness, Lila. That's proof you're still human." She smiled faintly. "You always know what to say." "Not always," I said. "But I've learned how to tell the truth." A few weeks later, I received a letter. It came from the correctional facility, no return name, but I didn't need one. My hands shook as I unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. "Michael, I know you hate me. You should. But I need you to understand, I didn't mean for it to happen that way. I wasn't trying to kill her. I was trying to end her pain. Maybe that makes me a monster. Maybe it makes me weak. But I loved her, and in my own twisted way, I thought I was saving her. She'll never forgive me. I don't expect her to. But tell her I'm sorry. Tell Clara I hope she never remembers me. Evan." I read it twice, then tore it into pieces. Some things don't deserve to live in memory. When I told Lila about it, she didn't ask what it said. She just shook her head. "He never changes," she whispered. "Even his apologies are about himself." After that, she seemed lighter, like hearing about the letter had closed a final door. Spring came early that year. The days grew longer, the air softer. Lila started volunteering at a recovery center for trauma survivors. At first, She went just once a week. Then it became every day. She found purpose in helping others rebuild, the same way she'd rebuilt herself. One afternoon, she invited me to come along. "You should see this," she said. The place was small but warm, sunlight pouring through wide windows, the scent of fresh coffee and disinfectant oddly comforting. She moved among the patients like she belonged there, her voice steady, her presence grounding. Watching her, I realized something. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was reclaiming her life. That night, as we walked back to the car, I said, "Your mother would be proud." She smiled softly. "You think so?" "I know so." She looked at me, eyes glistening in the sunset. "I used to think healing meant forgetting. But it's not that, is it? It's remembering and not letting it destroy you." I nodded. "Exactly." We stood there for a long while, the sky painted in gold and red, before she spoke again. "Dad," she said quietly, "I want to sell the house. Evan's house. I want to take the money and start something new. A foundation for women who've survived what I did." I felt my throat tighten. "That's a beautiful idea." She smiled through tears. Then it settled. The Lila Carter Foundation. The way she said her name, without shame, without fear, made something inside me finally rest. That night, after she and Clara went to bed, I sat on the porch with a drink, listening to the soft hum of crickets. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. I thought about Evan, about what he'd destroyed, and what he hadn't. He'd taken our peace, but not our strength. He'd tried to end her story, but she'd rewritten it herself. When I looked up at the stars, I whispered, "You did it, baby girl. You made it through the fire." The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the garden Lila had planted weeks ago. And for the first time, I believed the nightmare was truly behind us. Almost. Because deep down, I knew there was still one more thing I had to do before I could let go completely.